Peter Marshall was the chaplain of the United States Senate. He preached a sermon in Washington in which he told the story of a man, I don't remember his name, I think it was Joe Dobbs or something like that, who owned a little store in the city that sold fresh fish. And Peter Marshall told of an experience that this man had one morning when he came to work, and he opened up his store and he enjoyed the aroma that greeted him as he walked inside, the odor of fresh fish and brine and all the rest, and he was getting things in order to open the store to the public, and the first customer that came in the door was a strange-looking man in a blue serge suit. And Joe noticed something extraordinary about this person. He didn't say anything when he came in the store. He didn't say good morning. He just looked at him with a piercing gaze and said to Joe, "Joe, I want you to come with me." And inexplicably, Joe felt like he was drawn by a magnet that couldn't be resisted. He took off his apron, hung it up on the rack, walked from around the counter, and went out to the door, hung the close sign on the door, and walked out in the street with the man in the blue serge suit and never went back. Well, of course, that never really happened in Washington. Peter Marshall was playing a little game here with his congregation. He was trying to put into a contemporary setting the call of the disciples of Jesus to ministry, where Jesus went by the seashore and he found Peter and Andrew and so on and James and John and said to them as they were mending their nets, "Follow me." And these professional people, for some reason, forsook everything that was part of their lives, and they left their nets where they were and walked away and followed Christ. Now, when we read of the call of the disciples in the New Testament, we are reading about people who had a face-to-face meeting with Christ and whose lives were never the same thereafter. One of those episodes that I find particularly meaningful is the call of the disciple Nathanael. We read that at the latter portion of the first chapter of the Gospel of St. John. I'll begin reading at verse 43 of chapter 1 of John's Gospel. The following day, Jesus wanted to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. And Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Philip said to him, "Come and see." You get the picture. Jesus had already called the first few disciples, including Philip. Philip ran and told his friend Nathanael. He was all excited. He said, "Nathanael, we have found the Messiah. We have found the one who was promised to us throughout the pages of the Old Testament, in the law and in the prophets. We have found the one of whom Moses wrote." Think about this for a minute. Philip is coming to one of his friends and said, "You know the Messiah that you were taught about in Sunday school, that you've heard about all of your life, that we all look forward to? He's here, and we found him." Well, Nathanael, of course, wants to know, where did you find him? Who is this fellow? And he's asking these questions to Philip, and Philip said, "It's Jesus of Nazareth." Nathanael's heart sinks and says, "Nazareth? Nazareth? Where did you ever get the idea that Nazareth would be the place where we would find the Messiah? Nazareth isn't even mentioned in the Old Testament. I mean, you guys must be out of your mind. What are you on? Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?" Nazareth was this small, insignificant village that had no rich heritage, either religious or otherwise. And so the excitement quickly turns to skepticism in the bosom of Nathanael. And Philip did the same thing that Peter and James and John did when they were telling others. He said, "Well, look, at least come and see. Let me show you this man, and then you come to your own conclusion. You make your own judgment. Don't just rely on my testimony. Come and see. Now, if I can read between the lines, I can see Nathaniel saying, well, okay, out of my friendship to you, I'll humor you. I'll come and see. That's the least I can do. But remember, nothing good can come out of Nazareth. I'm from Missouri, and I'm not going to be quick to jump on this train. And so we read on. In verse 47, Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, and he said of him, Behold, indeed, an Israelite in whom there is no guile. The Bible says very little about Nathanael. But what a wonderful description of a human being that Jesus makes of him. Jesus sees him coming. And he says, look, here comes an Israelite in whom there is no spirit of deception. It's as if Diogenes, who had roamed the city streets of Athens with his lamp looking for an honest man, had finally found the honest man that had eluded him so long. Jesus said, here's an honest man, an Israelite in whom there is no guile. And Nathanael hears this, and he is guileless. It's like an infant. I mean, he can't imagine how Jesus knows anything about him because he'd never met Jesus before. And so listen to his response. Nathanael said to him, how do you know me? Jesus answered and said to him, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. And Nathanael answered and said to him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You're the King of Israel. And again, this sounds childish, doesn't it? I mean, first the man is skeptical, but he goes along with his friend simply because his friend is, okay, I'll go and see him. And Jesus gives this cryptic statement about knowing him when he was still under the fig tree, and says a little bit about Nathanael having not ever met the man. And Nathanael is so impressed by this display of insight and that he regarded instantly as supernatural knowledge of Nathanael, that all of the doubts and all of the skepticism vanished in an instant, and he makes this profound confession of faith. Rabbi, you're the Son of God. And he's ready to follow Jesus. Now, some of you may remember the great entertainer, Al Jolson. I once spoke about Al Jolson in Chicago, and I was getting all excited about Al Jolson, and afterwards people in the congregation came up to me and said, who's Al Jolson? And I said, I'm really getting old when people haven't heard of Al Jolson. Well, Al Jolson was a fantastic singer, entertainer, and his live performances were extraordinary. He was as animated as Sammy Davis Jr. was. And Jolson used to get out there and he would belt some of these songs out, and the people would go nuts. They would roar with their approval. And then he would come and he would slide across the stage and get up, and then his famous expression that he used over and over again was this. You've heard this expression. You maybe haven't attributed it to Al Jolson, but you've heard it. Jolson's famous line was this: you ain't seen nothing yet. And then he'd go on to the rest of his program and wow them and dazzle them even more. Well, it was like before Al Jolson was ever born. This is how I read this encounter, this face-to-face meeting between Nathanael and Jesus. Nathanael sees Jesus and hears Jesus talk to him about himself in ways that Nathanael can't figure out how Jesus could have known anything about him. And Jesus said, you think that's something? You ain't seen nothing yet. Well, that's not exactly what Jesus said. Let's look at his exact words, but it's the same sentiment here. He said, Jesus answered and said to him, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, most assuredly, I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Nathanael, you haven't seen anything yet. But here's what you will see. You will see the heavens themselves open. And you will see angels descending and ascending on the Son of Man. Now, I feel certain that Nathanael had no earthly idea what Jesus was talking about. That was something he had to think about. I don't think he had to think very long before he got the reference, however. Because when Jesus was speaking in this manner, which seems so utterly cryptic to us, he was clearly referring to an event of great importance that took place in the Old Testament that we read about in the book of Genesis. And let's turn our attention there for just a moment. If we turn back to Genesis 28, beginning at verse 10, we read these words. Now Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed there all night because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set on the earth, and its top reached to heaven, and there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your descendants, and your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth, and so on. For behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this place. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. And then the scripture says this, that Jacob awoke, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid, and he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, Bethel, and this is the gate of heaven. Think about what happens to Jacob here in this vision in the desert wilderness at night. He stops when darkness falls because there's no inn and it's not safe to continue traveling in the ancient world at night. And he just goes to sleep by the road, puts a rock for his pillow. And in the middle of the night, he has this vision, he has this dream where he sees the heavens open and he sees a ladder connecting earth and heaven with angels moving up and down this ladder. We've all heard the children's song, we are climbing Jacob's ladder. What was the significance of this encounter that Jacob has that changes his life at Bethel, a place called the house of God? I think this passage is extremely relevant to our day because what I discern as I go around and about this country is that the collective experience of our people is not of a profound sense of the daily awareness of the presence of God, but rather, as the philosophers of our day, people like Camus and Sartre and others, have indicated that our sense today is one of estrangement, of alienation, and a profound sense of the absence of God. The whole world is still waiting for Godot. We feel alone and abandoned in a vacuous universe where there is no sensation of the presence of God. We're an extremely empirically oriented people. If we can't see it, taste it, touch it, feel it, smell it, we don't believe it's real. We've lost any connection with another dimension, with a supranatural realm. Well, we're not all that unlike Jacob. Jacob, whose father was Isaac and whose grandfather was Abraham, who had told them stories of their own encounters with God. But at this point in his life, Jacob is certainly not indicating or manifesting any sense of the presence of God. And he has this vision. Now, here's what he says when he wakes up. Surely God was in this place, and I knew it not. God was here. And I missed it. Now, what was the significance of the imagery that he saw in his dream? He saw a ladder. And what's the purpose of a ladder? Usually we use it as a tool to climb, to scale into a certain height. If I want to get from the ground to my roof of my house, I can't leap tall buildings at a single bound. I need to climb a ladder. So I get that ladder to connect me from the earth to a higher point of elevation. That's what a ladder is for. And in the Jewish imagery here, the ladder is the connecting link between the supernatural realm and the natural realm, between earth and heaven. And that's what Jacob was sensing, that there was no access. Remember Sartre's moving play, no exit. If he would write of this experience, he would write no access. That's what we sense, that there is no access to heaven. If there is a heaven, there's no access to God if there is a God. We remember again Paul's teaching in Romans in the 5th chapter, after he spells out the work of Christ to bringing about our justification and talks about the fruit or the results of our justification. He says, therefore we have peace with God and what? Access into his presence. But you see, for there to be access between heaven and earth, between us and God, there has to be a bridge. There has to be a ladder. There has to be something that bridges the gap and that is a connecting link between these two realms. Something that the angels can come down and go back up on. Jacob never saw it. He just had a dream. And his children didn't see it. In a sense, the whole history of the Old Testament was a quest for the ladder of Jacob. And Nathanael appears before Jesus. And Jesus says, Nathanael, you will see the heavens open and the angels of God ascending and descending on what? On the Son of Man. Do you hear what Nathanael is hearing? Jesus is saying to him, Nathanael, you're going to see the veil be removed between heaven and earth. And you're going to see angels ascending and descending on me. What Jesus is saying to Nathanael is, Nathanael, you're all excited because I knew something about you before I ever met you. You ain't seen nothing yet. You're speaking to the incarnation of Jacob's ladder. You're speaking to the one who has been sent from heaven as a bridge to planet Earth to provide access for the people of God so that there can be a connection between this world and the heavenly places. So in these cryptic words, Jesus is foreshadowing, as it were, to Nathanael the whole focal point of his earthly ministry, because his ministry is to be that of a mediator. Jesus is called the mediator of the new covenant. And what does a mediator do? The mediator stands between two parties that are estranged, that are missing each other, that are not connecting. There seems to be no access of a relationship between the two. But the ladder of Jacob bridges the gap. And Christ comes to mediate between heaven and earth, between God and man. The response of Nathanael was somewhat different from that of Jacob. When God came in the midst of the night to Jacob Jacob was terrified, and Jacob was astonished. Jacob was in awe, and he said, surely God was in this place. I missed it. I knew it not. When Nathanael meets Jesus, and the living ladder of Jacob appears, what is the response of Nathanael? Thou art the Son of God. In a sense, what Nathanael was in whom there was no guile. He saw what Jacob failed to see. He said, surely God is in this place, and I know it well.
Loving you alone feels so beautiful, and yet it hurts the most. You became my quiet sunrise, the dream I never dared to say. Every smile you gave so freely took my breath a little away. I held this love like fragile glass, so precious, soft and true. But every beat inside my heart was only reaching out to you. Unspoken love is sweet and painful, like honey mixed with rain. a tender hope I hold so tightly, while it slowly breaks me. Loving you from just one side now leaves my soul in silent blue. 'Cause the deeper that I fall alone, the lonelier I do. I can't blame my heart for choosing someone it could never keep. So I smile through hidden heartache and love you quietly. Unspoken love is sweet and painful, like honey mixed with rain. A tender hope I hold so tightly, while it slowly breaks me. Loving you from just one side now leaves my soul in silent blue. 'Cause the deeper that I fall alone, the lonelier I do. Maybe loving you in silence is the closest I can stay, though it leaves behind a sorrow that may never fade away. Unspoken love is sweet and painful, like honey mixed with rain. A tender hope I hold so tightly, while it slowly breaks me. Loving you from just one side now leaves my soul in silent blue. 'Cause the deeper that I fall alone, the lonelier I do.